as opposed to going to Russia. You know, Kharkiv, after all, is 40 kilometers from Russia. It should have been easy, right? Well, no, because all that area is mined. There is no real spot where you can easily move, not without a guide, not without somebody who knows what they're doing. I also looked into the possibility of somebody helping me out.
Dogan explains that in July 14, 2023, right after Gonzalo was released from Ukrainian jail, Gonzalo contacted Dogan along with multiple other contacts who offered him a chance to escape Ukraine by being smuggled into Russia.
The Facts Hunter.
Moving on. Going back to the book, we have several steps one must follow in order to survive life in a foreign jail. The first step is to contact the embassy. As an American with a U.S. passport, Gonzalo had the right to contact the embassy. Remember, Gonzalo was put in house arrest after he was arrested the first time and landed in jail after his second arrest, meaning that he was already in jail in his own apartment because he was an American. But instead of contacting the American embassy and try to get himself out of Ukraine, he decided to continue making videos that were against the law, getting himself in deeper trouble. All this time, Gonzalo could have been making YouTube videos in Russian-friendly countries such as Hungary or Belarus after negotiating his release from Ukrainian house arrest. But he was too stupid to understand the nature of his circumstances. This brings us to the next point of Brooks' book: the amount of assistance the embassy can bring to an American in a foreign jail. Brooks states in his book that the most the American embassy can do for you is intercede with local authorities to make sure your rights are being respected. Outside of that, the most basic assistance the embassy can provide is to visit you in jail, give you a list of local lawyers, and notify your family. Now, this disproves the claims from other propagandists who claim that it would have taken just a phone call from the State Department to get Gonzalo free.
All it would take is for the United States, the State Department, to make one phone call. One phone call, 1 minute, and Gonzalo would be deported. Kick him out of Ukraine. That's what the government should do.
The U.S. Embassy never provided an attorney, no communication to Gonzalo with his family. He endured all 8 months incommunicado.
We need to remember, Gonzalo was not important enough for the State Department to get involved. It is idiotic to believe that the State Department will raise a finger for a Russian propagandist like Gonzalo Lira, who made countless claims accusing the U.S. of escalating the war in Ukraine, about being warmongerist, while at the same time praising Putin and Russia for conducting a perfect military operation and for having won the war because, according to him, in 2023, the Russians had already won the war.
They're not stupid. I mean, I have said before, the Russians have a lot of flaws, like we all do, but being stupid is certainly not one of them. They are smart people, very pragmatic people, and that's what they're going to do. The Russians know how this is going to end. The story has already been written. Everybody knows how this is going to end. The war is over. Now it's just the mopping up.
And so now it seems clear that Lithuania and Poland are setting up the conditions to provoke Russia into attacking one or the other or both. And this will draw in all the other NATO states, including the United States. Now, it doesn't take a genius to realize that the brains behind this idiotic idea are American brains, the Biden administration. There are crazies in the State Department and in the US Senate and in the Biden administration itself. They all want war with Russia.
Go figure. Continuing with Brooks' book, we already established that 1. Contacting the embassy is the primary go-to when in a foreign country. 2. The embassy's power is limited. 3. They weren't going to get Gonzalo out without the intervention of a higher authority, which is the State Department. So the next 3 important things in order for Gonzalo to survive were 4. Knowing the value of cash and cigarettes. 5. Learning the language and get to know people. And number 6. Keeping your head down. Gonzalo Lira was a heavy smoker, and according to the documentaries, there are no cigarettes for sale inside the prison's commissary. And the only way to get cigarettes inside a Ukrainian prison is if the prisoner's relatives and loved ones, or people who pretend to be one of these two, send cigarettes inside care packages.
Those who behave exemplary and work or get money from their families can go shopping in the prison's own shop. You can get almost everything here: tea, coffee, sausages, candy. Only cigarettes are not sold. They can only be brought in or sent by families.
Gonzalo's only relationship to someone outside prison in Ukraine was his ex-wife, who was, according to the divorce documents, living in a town over 100 miles away in western Ukraine.
And I knew he had a couple kids, and he was married, I think, to a Ukrainian woman. If I'm not mistaken, I think he said she was an au pair. So she was in childcare or something like that. But I'd often talk to him in Holland, sometimes when he was traveling, but mostly in Ukraine when we had these conversations. And he would never bring up his wife and kids. Sorry, I don't know if he was married, but I think he called her his wife. He obviously had a fondness for his children. If you look at his old studio, you can see pictures of his kids, drawings in the backgrounds. But I don't think he really ever, as far as I ever saw, shared imagery of his wife or his kids. I think he kept that very private. And I asked him once live and once off the air. I said, "So what's going on, with your kids? Like, is everything okay with them? Did you get them out of the country? What's happening with your wife," sort of thing. And he didn't want to answer it. He went in a totally different direction. He skirted it. He behaved very awkwardly around the subject of, like, what's going on with your wife and kids? You get to see them, sort of thing. I think he said that he was able to communicate with his kids, but there was no fondness or attachment to his wife. And I've had lots of conversations with guys over the years, both privately and on call-in sessions. And to me, that picked up on me as she had taken the kids and left.
People are asking about how you're able to parent your kids being so far away. Like, how is he keeping up his life as a father?
I'm not going to discuss that.
Okay.
So I don't think that they were together for the last few years, which might have led him to the martyrdom sort of thing. The fuck around, find out, because he had really nothing else to live for at that point. I would imagine if his kids have been removed from his day-to-day life, because I could only imagine, as a father myself, I would want to spend my last days, if I knew I had, last days coming up, because I know he had some health issues. Apparently he died of pneumonia, double pneumonia in both of his lungs in the prison. He was a very heavy smoker the last few years, because you just see him chain smoking away, through videos. So that's not going to help if you've got health issues. I think he had heart issues. He did confirm it in one video. But it was like a fuck around, find out moment. And I don't get it. The only thing that I can think of is, maybe she just took the kids and left, sort of thing. So he never really talked about any of that stuff publicly. And when I asked him, he would just don't want to talk about that. Even privately, don't want to talk about it. It's not a conversation I want to have. So I found that interesting.
So I doubt he had someone sending him any cigarettes or care packages at all.
In the second prison, Colony 4, the inmates live in large shared accommodation blocks, also under strict security measures, but with a relatively large amount of freedom. The accommodation blocks have no locks, and the inmates can move around freely. A TV room and a kitchenette.
I only can assume that Gonzalo must have tried to ask for favors from other inmates, bumping cigarettes from dangerous and violent criminals. This by promising to pay them back once he got a hold of his computer to access his PayPal account. This must have alerted the inmates that Gonzalo had money because he was wealthy, turning Gonzalo into a piggy bank for the inmates, who in turn decided to torture him and bully him in exchange for cash. But it's highly unlikely that the SBU was involved in any way. The reason is that Ukraine, prior to the 2022 invasion, was full of hackers and internet scammers. The SBU has access to plenty of tools to get to Gonzalo's money. They didn't need to torture him or extort him to get access to his money if they really wanted that money badly. Hell, the same inmates must have known some hackers of their own. Now, a lot of people will probably give Gonzalo the benefit of the doubt because they don't know what type of scammer Gonzalo Lira was. But if you have watched my previous videos on the series The Deconstruction of Coach Red Pill, an American Parasite, you probably remember that this guy learned how to make up stories since he was 7 years old. I have no doubt that Gonzalo's accusations against the SBU are all lies to cover up for his mistakes. So, my best guess is that he bumped one too many cigarettes from the wrong inmate and ended up being extorted for the money he probably promised to pay them back in exchange for cigarettes that would help alleviate the cravings caused by his addictions. Poor stupid son of a bitch. Oh well, moving on. Now, in my deconstruction of Coach Red Pill series, we can see on several occasions that Gonzalo was really bad at adapting to his surroundings. As a kid, he got bullied at school for acting like a snob. When he attended university in Chile, people knew him to be a loner. At Dartmouth, he was ostracized by teachers and students alike after his sexual assault conviction. And in New York, he struggled to build social connections in one of the most cosmopolitan cities on the planet. These facts gives us an indication that Gonzalo most likely had problems meeting the requirements for the next key lesson to survive life inside a foreign jail, which is learning the language and getting to know the people. As I already mentioned in previous videos, Gonzalo Lira was a lazy student. He only spoke English and not fluent Spanish. He had already mentioned in the debate with Laser Pig that he was too stupid to learn a new language.
You care about Ukraine?
Yes.
So, do you want to join me in singing the Ukrainian national anthem then?
Chat, I'm going to leave it as a democratic vote. Chat, are we done here or should I continue with this fool? Hit me with done, D for done, or C for continue.
I have two questions.
Go ahead.
Do you want to join me in singing the Ukrainian? If you love Ukraine so much, do you want to join me in singing the national anthem?
I wouldn't be able to pronounce it properly, and I have a horrible singing voice.
So do I.
Continue. Oh, okay, fine. Okay, so let's go on. So you are in favor of prolonging the war?
Do you not know the words to the Ukrainian national anthem?
No, because I don't speak Ukrainian.
You don't speak Ukrainian. You don't immerse yourself in the culture of Ukraine.
No, because I'm stupid with languages. What do you want me to say? Okay, I'm terrible with languages. Shit, I lived for a year and a half in France and I couldn't learn fucking French, even though I had fucking daily lessons at it. I'm sorry. It's just not how my brain is wired. I'm sort of like stuck here, and if I were to move to a different city in Ukraine, it wouldn't improve my situation, it'd probably make it worse, especially it would be a city that I didn't know, and I don't know Russian or Ukrainian. And so that would play against me. And so
even after living for years in Ukraine and having a Ukrainian ex-wife with 2 kids, he never bothered learning the language. In fact, he was eager for the Russians to take over Ukraine, claiming that Kharkiv was a predominant Russian-speaking city.
Well, Gonzalo, Rada's got a question here for you about Russia. Will you evacuate before Russia captures? Go ahead.
Yeah, will Gonzalo evacuate before Russia captures the eastern half of Ukraine as he predicts? No, I want to see the invasion, man. I want to see it up close and personal. I want to see what happens.
Do you have a death wish?
No, I love life. I'm not afraid of death, you know?
What about the notion of, like smoking? Because, I mean, you never used to smoke before in your shows. Is it just something that you've picked up recently, or did you just smoke off air and then, bring it on air now just because it's zero fucks?
No. I wasn't smoking before this conflict. It's just the stress of it, see?
So basically, Gonzalo believed his own lies, thinking that the Russians were not interested in harming civilians, because to him, Putin is the good guy, Zelensky is a cockhead, and that all the dead civilians so far were the result of crimes committed by the Ukrainian Nazis. This guy was completely disconnected from reality and knee-deep into his own bizarre world.
I just want to tell you that unfortunately today there will be no Wednesday CRP exclusive video. Last Wednesday, February 24th, last Thursday, February 24th, the Russians invaded Ukraine. I'm going to be leaving this location pretty soon, probably today or tomorrow, because, quite frankly, staying here is not safe. And on top of that, some of my video content that I posted on my CRP channel got picked up by Russian language news sources, and they did not like at all what I had to say. And so there have been death threats against me. Shocking as that may sound, actual death threats. And in fact, there are people who claim, and they seem to be in a position to know, that there are Bitcoin assassins, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, but there are Bitcoin assassins who apparently are looking for me. So I'm going to have to go.
This is not a healthy state of mind if the goal is to assimilate to your environment and become friendly with the people that surrounds you. And we have to put this in perspective. He was a YouTuber who was followed by a number of people who believe the same lies he believes. In prison, he was surrounded by people that did not care for him or believe the same lies he believed. He was a rich, spoiled brat surrounded by criminals who grew up in one of the poorest countries in Eastern Europe. This explains why he ended up listening to prison inmates who suggested to him to leave the country. Unfortunately, instead of leaving Ukraine through the right channels, contacting the embassy and negotiating to leave, he tried to cross the border, getting himself into more trouble than he already was. He was too stupid indeed. And finally, keeping your head down. Brooks mentions in his book that if you're in jail, it is important to be smart and do not do anything that will call attention to you. The local goons will pick on anyone who acts as a tough guy. Gonzalo never learned to be humble and to keep his head down. As a matter of fact, in several videos, he claims that he learned as a kid to stand up to bullies.
What I hated in particular, there was one man, a big guy, bigger than me. I mean, like a good 2-3 inches bigger than me and maybe 40 pounds heavier, carrying a camera and looking with that smug, arrogant face. And the man at the reception desk, the employee who didn't need to be there but was there, right? Well, this photographer or whatever he was, this big guy from the press, he was berating the guy at the hotel front desk. And berating him because he couldn't get outside or something like that. I forget exactly what it was. And I was like, dude, and I said to him these words. I said, he's trying to help you, you system pig. And he turned on me, and he was a big guy, and he figured that he could intimidate me with his size. And see, my old man was a bully. He bullied the shit out of me, so I know how to handle bullies. And what you do with a bully is that you step right into their fucking face and make it clear that, yeah, you can probably beat the shit out of me, but it's going to cost you. And see, bullies, they always back down when they know it's going to cost them now, don't they? Yeah. Anyway, that was like the one major tiff I had at the hotel. But
because, according to him, when you stand up to bullies, the bullies always stand down. This is another reason why you never want to take advice from this guy's videos. Gonzalo Lira was a man who had a crappy childhood and could never learn to adapt to his environment. Gonzalo had a very abnormal childhood. His racist father took him and his family from country to country, making Gonzalo spend his childhood school years as the new kid in class just about every other year. On top of this, he was conditioned into believing that he was royalty, just because he was the descendant of the first president of Chile, which turned him into a snob who thought he was above everyone else. Because of this, Gonzalo had problems making friends. He was ostracized and developed a form of highly functional sociopathy. The main point is that Gonzalo Lira was not smart enough to know how to follow rules, and most important, social rules. He had the chance to leave Ukraine at the beginning of the 2022 invasion, and he opted to stay. He could have negotiated his exit from the country after his first arrest, but he opted to stay. He could have survived jail, but he was too stupid to adapt to his environment. Now, if after listening to the arguments I presented in this video by using Owen Brooks' book as a reference to support my case, and you're still not convinced that Gonzalo Lira died in prison because he was a victim of his own stupidity, before we end this two-part video series, I want to bring to your attention the ultimate proof that Gonzalo Lira was a complete moron. I want to bring to your attention the escape attempt Gonzalo turned down when he was offered to be smuggled into Russia. If you remember the videos Gonzalo made when he tried to cross the border into Hungary, there is a part where Gonzalo explains that he attempted to contact people to help him find his way out of Ukraine.
As opposed to going to Russia, Kharkiv, after all, is 40 kilometers from Russia. It should have been easy, right? Well, no, because all that area is mined. There is no real spot where you can easily move, not without a guide, not without somebody who knows what they're doing. I also looked into the possibility of somebody helping me out, and a couple of them were grifters. It was clear as day, they wanted money. And the others, they had a lot of good intentions, but they didn't know what the hell they were doing. And so ultimately I was not able to find a Sherpa, a guide, who could get me through. And I'm gonna chance it at the border.
Well, in the video, he claims none of those people he contacted were able to help him out. This was another lie. According to one of those people he reached out for help, Gonzalo was offered to be smuggled into Russia, but he refused to escape to freedom because he didn't want to leave behind his motorcycle. What? What the fuck? That's right. The guy who claims to have over $140,000 in a PayPal account didn't want to leave behind his $14,000 motorcycle. I found this story in a Rumble video by a channel from a Russian propagandist who goes by the name Bad Wolf, run by an American trader named John Mark Dugan. Mark Dugan is a former Palm Beach County Sheriff's officer who fled to Russia after being incriminated in a conspiracy involving DNC leaked documents. In 2016, he managed to flee to Moscow right before the FBI could get a hold of him, and he's been living there after being granted political asylum by Vladimir Putin. In Mark Dugan's video titled Gonzalo Lira Killed by a Motorcycle, Dugan explains that in July 14, 2023, right after Gonzalo was released from Ukrainian jail, Gonzalo contacted Dugan along with multiple other contacts who offered him a chance to escape Ukraine by being smuggled into Russia. Dugan shows the text messages he exchanged with Gonzalo. In the messages, Dugan explains to Gonzalo that he knew people who could help him out as long as Gonzalo didn't contact anybody else for help.
So, on July 14th, 2023, I was contacted by Gonzalo Lira, and he contacted me asking me if I could help get him out of Ukraine. Of course, I said sure, and of course I asked him for verification that it was him. He actually contacted me on a call, and we had a conversation, and I said, yeah, I got some people that I've done this before with, similar stuff. We will get you out, not a problem. So I was very specific with Gonzalo. I said, look, I will help you get out, but you can't talk about this with anybody.
The day after the first exchange of text messages between Dugan and Gonzalo, Dugan's contacts told him that Gonzalo had been contacting another person who had the reputation of being a gossip girl.
Because I knew that he was talking to one other person, at least one other person, a woman here who is a vicious gossip monger. And if I was going to go and partake in this operation to get him out, I was not going to get my ass caught in Ukraine because this guy was running his mouth. So he sends me his passport photos. So he wrote me up. He wrote me on the 14th, and I said, look, I'm not going to have anything to do with these two people. If you go that route, then you're on your own. I'm not going to help you. Because he kept talking about it with this person. And he said, look, my goal is to get out of here with as little drama as possible. And then I told him I've done it before. I know many places to cross, but I'll only do it quietly and without people who are idiots involved. And he said, good, I'm not interested in being fodder for gossip mongers or ineffective people. My likely sentence is 5 to 8 years in a Ukraine prison labor camp. I can't afford to get mixed up with silly people who are in it for the clicks. He told me his U.S. passport expired, but he'll be entering on his Chilean one that allows a visa-free entrance into Russia, which was perfect, right?
Dugan told Gonzalo that if he wanted to escape Ukraine, he would have to leave his motorcycle behind. Gonzalo refused and decided to take his chances by attempting to cross the border to Hungary.
I talked to another person that I happen to know, another person that kind of does what I do, but he contacted me. So when I talked to Gonzalo Lira, I told him about my plan, how I was going to get him through the border, out of Ukraine and through the border. Well, he didn't like that idea. He didn't like that idea because I told him very specifically, you're not bringing your motorcycle. So he started talking about my plan with some other people. I was very angry about it, and I wrote to him, hey, I worked out the details with my friends. Then I found out you're talking to someone else in parallel, specifically after I said it was required that you don't talk to anyone. So my guys are out. Good luck with your other channel, though, brother. I hope you get here safely. And he said, what the F? I said, my friends had another request to help you from the direction of the person I told you not to speak to. My friends are not going to risk people going into Ukraine to get you, because if you're fishing around, then this will get leaked. My people don't trust the individual who you are talking to. She is not reliable. And that was it. And that was pretty much the last conversation I had with Gonzalo Lira. Then he contacted my other friend. He wanted to bring his motorcycle. My other friend said, no way in hell. This plan does not call for you bringing your motorcycle in here. So he called me back and he said, you know what? Well, I'm not leaving my motorcycle. I'm just going to risk driving through the border and we'll see what happens. He's like, this is Ukraine. They probably don't have any communication with headquarters at the border. So I'm just going to risk it and see what happens. That's not the way it works, especially in a wartime situation. Everybody is sketchy of an American coming and going. Gonzalo basically
signed his own
death warrant over a fucking motorcycle.
That's right, people. Gonzalo Lira, the guy who claims to be able to spend $11,000 at the drop of a hat and claims to have over $140,000 in a PayPal account, didn't want to leave behind a run-down motorcycle which doesn't seem to cost that much. $14,000 at most.
You see, nominally, on the first day that I was arrested, I could have posted bail. But I was not given the opportunity to do so, to contact the people who would have the cash available to post my bail. It wasn't that much, it was $11,000, which I don't want to sound arrogant. $11,000 is quite a bit of money for most people. I am blessed by the good fortune of having the means to put together that kind of money at a moment's notice. And so I could have posted bail on the very first day.
But this also makes me wonder, when Gonzalo was talking about not finding anyone to help him cross the border because he only found grifters and nice but incompetent people, in which category does Mark Dugan fall in? Is he one of the grifters, or is he one of the nice but incompetent people?
A couple of them were grifters. It was clear as day, you know, they wanted money. And the others, they had a lot of good intentions, but they didn't know what the hell they were doing.
But I personally believe John Marks Dugan's story. Dugan is a former Marine, and the Daily Beast has written 2 articles explaining his long history of fraud and acts of espionage on American soil. Dugan has also participated in propagandist operations where he reported straight from the front lines in Russian-occupied Ukrainian territory. So I do believe in his story. And I also believe Dugan's story because it verifies my argument. The argument I've been making throughout this 2-part video series. The argument that Gonzalo Lira, despite having all those accreditations of being a published author, a film director, and a Dartmouth graduate, was not a smart man. He was an idiot who died because he was not important. Because propagandists, unlike certified journalists and reporters, had no value whatsoever to either United States or Russia. Gonzalo was a liar, a Russian propagandist who died for nothing, a victim of his own stupidity. And so, I say it again, burn in hell, Gonzalo Lira, you poor stupid son of a bitch. Well, that's it for this video series. If you like the videos, help the channel grow by clicking a like and a subscribe. Share the video and help fight Russian propaganda. Gonzalo Lira might be dead, but there are still plenty of pro-Russian channels spreading misinformation out there. In the meantime, this is a Fox Hunter. Thanks again for watching, take care, and bye for now.